Make America great again. That has been the cornerstone of Trump's foreign policy pronouncement throughout the decades, even when he was not running for politics. Now, we saw a version of that not long ago when Trump was president from 2016 to 2020. But what does Make America Great Again mean this time around, especially for us here in Asia? Thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you,
It's
Richard.
always good to catch up with you throughout the years from Honolulu and all around the world, and now here in Manila. Let's talk about U.S.-China competition in this part of the world, and in particular, you are a Vietnam expert, and I've drawn on your work over the past decade or so to really appreciate this granular yet significant, if not tectonic shift in U.S.-Vietnam relations, and not to mention, of course, we want to talk about Philippines and U.S. cooperation too. But before going there, what is your understanding of the implications of the latest U.S. elections in terms of foreign policy?
Yeah, this is a tough question, but I have to make an usual
Disclaimer, of
first
course,
here
please.
because I work for the U.S. government. But I'm here. Anything that I'm gonna say is gonna be by my own
Personal
opinions,
capacity.
personal capacity,
Yeah.
and I'm here on my personal capacity, and it's all my views. Has nothing to do with my employers. So it's gonna be my candid opinion from me. Okay.
As an academic scholar,
yep.
yep.
Yes. I think anything is up on the air. So we have a new president of the United States. We have seen him being the president 8 years ago, 4 years ago. We have seen him acting, right? But the second term, his second term will be significantly different from the first term because he's learned a lesson, not a lesson, several lessons.
Right.
He learned something very important for him from the first term.
Can we talk about that? So what do you think are the lessons he learned from the first time when he admittedly, I mean, he saw that from Joe Rogan, among other podcasts, among others, that, back then it was his first time in office. This time it's going to be different.
Right.
He learned this lesson. So what are these lessons?
I think the lessons that he have learned from the first term was mostly domestic related. And in terms of foreign policy, I think he probably won't change a lot. And he probably also learned a little bit from the successes as well as failures of his foreign policy, action during his first term. But I think the core belief that he has had would be, would stay. And so we can expect him to, raise tariffs to China, use tariff as a weapon in his, dealing with China. He still wants to make America great again, which means means different, for him than for many other people outside. The phrase "Make America Great Again" can be interpreted many different ways. But for him, it is. I think that for many people in the world, making America great again would mean that America wants to be, the leader or the boss or whatever else. But that's not Trump. Trump doesn't want America to be he wants America to be the leader in terms that may not be, resonate with people in outside. Like, we want to be a leader in technology, in manufacturing,
breaking jobs.
But we don't want to be the police, the world police.
Policeman of the world,
I don't want to be your boss. It's up to you. I don't care, But I want to be a strong nation. Whenever I deal with another nation, I'm in a strong position. So that's what maybe, I think that.
So his reading is that the U.S. has been bogged down right and left, spending here and there, trying to be the world's policeman, while there are a lot of problems at home that he has to fix. So Make America Great Again is making sure that the foundations of American power are restored.
Yeah, of course.
That is my understanding.
Everybody talks about that, not just Trump, but also Biden talks about that.
Of course,
But I think Trump also learned from all of the things that he has seen the last several decades, because he's almost 80 years.
Yeah.
He's a year old. So he have learned from that, and he wants to. I think he will make a break with all the traditions of U.S. foreign policy last. Not just 3 decades, but also maybe even 7 decades, post-World War II. And so post-World War II, there is a core fundamentals of U.S. foreign policy, which is
Right.
engagement. Internationalism was the ideology of the U.S. foreign policy establishment. Now it's no longer.
So you mean the whole liberal international order that the U.S. built since the end of Second World War? There'll be a revisiting of that under second Trump presidency.
I'm not sure how Trump, he doesn't really care about international order. He just wants America to be strong.
He's a patriot in that sense.
Yeah,
He's a patriot.
and by making America strong in his own ways, he can, because the United States is so big and so influential, and so it can shape the order in that way. But he doesn't really care about international order. He just wants to make America strong. And so the I don't think that I would expect that the United States government under the Trump administration will reduce, in the eyes of the observers, will likely reduce U.S. commitment to the current international order. And we have seen them criticizing the liberal international order, right? That they want to keep some part of it, which are beneficial for the United States, but some part of it are not.
So more selective approach.
Yeah, selective go. Yeah.
Now, obviously, you cannot understand America's foreign policy nowadays without also understanding that the world order itself is shifting as we speak. I mean,
Right.
Russia and China have this strong notion of new world order. Other less hostile non-Western powers like India will talk about a more multipolar
Right.
order. Or in the most, I would say, political correct term, we can talk about a post-American world order. How does that play into the Make America Great Again calculus? The fact that U.S. is still a huge part of the world economy since around 25%, still a global military behemoth. But nevertheless, we also see the rise of the rest. It is happening. India, China, BRICS nations. How do those two elements work together? Is this also an element of Trump accepting that the world is changing, and along with that, America has also revisit how it preserves its position of strength in this international order?
I think his primary concern is not really the shape of the international order, but primarily U.S. position in whatever is the international order.
Right.
So his primary concern would be U.S. position, and he wants to make the United States strong again, because what he saw in the past was a weak U.S. A United States that nobody fear.
Right.
He wants he wants other countries to fear the United States, right?
Or respect, at least. Yeah.
Well, respected.
Yeah.
But respect also means that you need to fear me a little bit.
Yeah.
So remember the Machiavelli
Better to be feared than to be loved. Yeah.
Yes. And so Trump, of course, wants to be feared rather than to be loved. Of course, he wants to be loved, but his
Right,
primary
right.
concern is want to be. And so they are talking about, doing whatever from a position of strength.
From a position
And
peace to
that's
strength.
Yes, whatever, peace, whatever else, from the position of strength. So they want to, elevate the United States to a position of strength. Whenever they are negotiating with somebody or doing peace, whatever else, the U.S. has to be on the position of strength, and so that is primary concern. Second, then that will have effect on international. That's okay, that would be the effect of they just care more about U.S. position, not as a hegemon,
Right.
but as a strong nation that people have to respect, and that is also very similar to what China and Russia and India
Right.
are aspiring
Yeah.
to. And so I think that our image of the United States as a world police or sort of benign hegemon or something during the last 70 years or so would be, we need to throw that out. And the U.S. now is no longer want to be a hegemon, want to be a strong nation.
Right. So it's much more nationalist, populist
Yes,
position. And
yes.
we even see that in less superpower countries like Turkey, or Viktor Orban in the case of Hungary.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of similarities here. It's not a unique phenomenon.
Yeah.
In that we had it in the case of President Duterte not long
Yeah.
ago in the Philippines, right?
Well, Yeah, I mean, no, but I think it's not. I would not compare in terms of foreign policy. In terms
Right.
of domestic politics, you can compare a lot, parallels
There's a
between
branding and all, yeah.
between Duterte and Trump.
Right.
But in terms of foreign policy, the Philippines is basically it's not a superpower, not a
Right,
great
of
power.
course, yeah,
So you
yeah.
have to kind of navigate your environment, particularly between the great powers. And Duterte wanted to have a independent foreign
Foreign
policy, right?
policy,
And so
yeah.
independence for him meaning sever a little bit the ties with the United States and
Right.
lean a little bit more to Russia and China and so on. But the United States is not a small country; it's a big power, and
Right.
Trump is very confident about that, and he just
Right.
wants to make United States stronger or great again, and so
Right.
he's not going to navigate world politics, but he will be try to make everything that he doesn't follow the rules to do something, but he just
Instinctive.
instinctively
Right.
use any means possible to make America great again. Whether or not he will be successful or not, we don't know.
Obviously, we are still very much in the speculative phase. We don't even know what's the composition of the
Right.
cabinet. I mean, some of the people who could keep, end up in his cabinet, like Elbridge Colby, we had him on this show. So there's that caveat too. But I want to also ask another question. I mean, because you also have a background in Europe, in Vietnam, etc. So you have a much more worldly, global understanding of how great power competition is going to lay out potentially in the coming years. Can Trump pull off a kind of a reverse Nixon in a sense of building a good relationship with Putin and then creating a wedge between China and Russia? Not to mention, maybe even reach out to North Korea, if
Yeah,
not Iran,
yeah.
even. Because everyone talks about the so-called new axis of
Yeah,
powers.
yeah.
In DC, everyone's talking about it.
Yeah.
And for some of us who are familiar with some of these countries,
Yeah.
we say like, no, all of those countries also have issues with each other. I was in North Korea for 4 or 5 days. I never heard them say a positive thing about China. The Russian and Iranians have also their own imperial history of competition, 19th century, which Iranians still talk about, where when they lost their territories in the Caucasus, Armenia, Azerbaijan, among others. And China and Russia, we all know. I mean, Soviet Union, China almost came to blows back in the day, and one reason perhaps why Mao Zedong had to develop nuclear weapons. But Nixon did something interesting, right? The
Right.
Kissingerian gambit was you can drive a wedge
Right.
between them
Right.
and side with the weaker side because
Right.
they're threatened with the stronger side.
Right.
Now, in the 21st century, we know that that relationship between Russia, Moscow, and China has been reversed. And China is the senior partner and Russia is the junior partner, especially now. Do you think, in theory, again, this is very
Yeah,
speculative, Alex, do you think in theory Trump can really, starting with the Ukraine issue, bring Russia kind of into the fold? Of course, everyone's going to be horrified in Europe, among others, but do that with respect to isolating China. Is that something fanciful, or do you think it's actually a strategy that could work or give
I think
trying to?
Yeah, I think that not just him, but maybe some of his advisors are also thinking it that way. Remembering
Bannon back
Nixon.
in the day.
Yeah, not just him, but many people. I think that's just natural when you are imagining that you have a three-party
Great
game,
power
and of
competition,
course
yeah.
you want to drive a wedge between the two other and and ally with the weaker one to balance the bigger one. But whether or not that strategy is successful depends on the conditions.
Correct.
And the current conditions right now, I think, is very different from the conditions that Nixon had.
Yeah.
Nixon had the conditions of a split, the Soviet Sino-Soviet split. It's a really big disagreement between the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China, and that has been there for a long time, and even led to a significant border conflict where people killed each other, between China and Soviet Union. That is not happening right now. What has happened right now is that both China and Putin and Xi Jinping are singing along the same song about their anti-Western song, with Putin talking about multilateralism and Xi Jinping talking about something similar, you
Yeah.
know. And so we don't have the similar conditions.
So the
that
enmity
would be
factor is not there. That's
yeah,
what they're
so
saying.
the
Yeah.
conducive condition for a Nixon strategy to thrive is not here.
Interesting.
So even if Trump tried to, but I don't think that he will succeed with that.
Not to mention domestic
Yeah, not to
pressure in
mention
the
domestic-
U.S.
yeah.
and in Europe, who
Yeah.
are going to be horrified
Yeah.
by something along those lines. But what if we can have a reverse Nixon light? Can he do a reverse Nixon light to at least
He can try.
slow down
Yeah, he
the
can-
Russian incorporation into the
But I don't think that he can because
Mm.
it's very hard for him to
Interesting.
sort of, to recreate a sort of a quasi alliance. We have had the quasi alliance between the United States and China during the later phase of the Cold War,
the
right?
Cold War, right?
It's very hard for him
To do
to really reconcile with Putin and to create a quasi alliance with Russia against China. One is that Russia doesn't have the stomach, doesn't want to really alienate
China,
China.
'cause they're
China
too
is not
dependent.
Russia's enemy.
Yeah.
During
Interesting.
Nixon's time, China and Russia are their primary
Right.
enemies,
Yes.
right? China is not Russia's enemy, and vice versa. Russia is not China's enemy.
Right.
Secondly, you still have Ukraine, and you still have to somehow deal with the Ukraine issue. Ukraine also has its own agency.
Agency, yeah.
Whatever Putin wants to do, they want to maintain
They'll
their
have a say, yeah.
their territorial integrity and everything else, sovereignty and so on. So they will fight, and then also we also have domestic, opinion in the United States.
Yeah.
So the election doesn't mean that the U.S. population gives Trump a mandate to sell out Ukraine.
Carte
Doesn't know
blanche.
that.
It's not a
And
carte blanche. Yeah.
and also many of the
Interesting.
potential, persons who will be, populating his cabinet, his government, are also pro-Ukraine. They are both anti and pro,
Right, right.
in his camp. And so,
Of course. Of
yeah.
course. So it will balance out.
So
and
yeah,
Make it
so
very
I think
difficult.
so. To sum up, the conditions are not conducive for such a Nixon, whether light or not.
Later. No,
strategy.
I really enjoyed this thought experiment because it's a thought experiment that is gaining a lot of traction in terms of just thinking out loud. But I absolutely agree with you that the constraints are just so much. And
Yeah.
yes, you're absolutely right. Ukraine has agency. President Zelensky immediately had a conversation with Trump. It looks like he's finding a formula whereby Ukraine has still room for maneuver, not to mention
Right,
protect
yeah.
its national sovereignty. And Europeans, from my understanding, again, you're very familiar with Europe also, they were already taking into consideration potential Trump 2.0. So it's not
Yeah.
like they're going to start from zero. They already
Right.
had the foundation laid out for that. Now, let's talk about the other country which is close to your heart, Vietnam. Another country, it's that your expertise, you have background in Vietnam. How is Vietnam going to play, in this era of new great power competition? Because, again, at least the strategic mythology is that Vietnam not only had 1,000 years of struggle against China, we can really nitpick about that,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
also that Vietnam had the history with France, with U.S., with China, and nowadays it's celebrated as the kind of a multi-alignment star along with India. And for good reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, we can see it. I mean, I think Vietnam is the only country that within a span of 10 months had the three superpowers having state visits.
Yeah.
Putin was there
Yeah.
despite the ICC warrant of arrest. Biden was there.
Yeah.
President Xi Jinping was there. Paramount leader Xi Jinping was there. Where do you see? Do you think this is a upshot of bigger factors that just Vietnam was trying to ride on? Or do you think that, speaking of strategic agency, Vietnam has really played these cards smartly? And do you think they can continue to play those cards or have to introduce some changes? Because Trump 2.0 will be different from Trump
Right.
1.0, not to mention Biden.
Yeah, I think that's a very big question. And so, again, Vietnam is also very aware of its very precarious position.
Yep.
And also they have a long history of resisting to Chinese power, and they are very proud of their own autonomy, agency. And so you can see a lot of parallels between Vietnam's behavior and India's behavior,
Right.
their foreign policy and Indian foreign policy. Even though they use different term, India use the term multi-alignment, right? Currently, right? Chai Shankar,
Yeah.
and Vietnam use the term
Bamboo
bamboo
diplomacy,
diplomacy,
yeah.
and stuff. But omnidirectional foreign policy
Right.
has been Vietnam's, trademark of its foreign policy after the Cold War. So during the Cold War, they leaned toward the Soviet Union, and then they had the conflict with China. They fought a war with China, and they allied with with the Soviet Union, and then they sort of lost that kind of conflict, and then they learned the lesson.
Right.
And entering the Cold War, they learned a lesson from that. They would not, rely on any of the great powers, because that is the lesson that they learned. In 1979, they signed a mutual defense treaty with the Soviet Union just a few months before China invaded them.
Yeah.
So even if now, so the lesson that the Vietnamese learn is that a mutual defense treaty is not it appeal for your units. No.
That was traumatic. That was a
Yeah.
traumatic
So
experience.
even
yeah.
if you have a mutual defense treaty with a nuclear armed
Superpowers,
great
yeah.
power, it doesn't really help you to deter aggression.
Yeah.
No. So Vietnam has to defend rather than deter. They cannot deter China.
Right.
So I think one of the lessons for Vietnam is that they cannot deter China with the hard power or even with alliance with everybody else. And so they thought they need to for them the option would be just to reach out to everybody.
Yep.
They cannot reach the optimal option, but they try to sort of somehow get the second best or third best
Yeah.
option.
Outcome, yeah.
And so they reach out to everybody. They try to make everybody their comprehensive strategic partner.
Yeah.
And now they have like 9 comprehensive.
And the language game,
it's just
comprehensive.
but we need to look
Yeah.
into the real thing rather than the labels. The
Right.
real thing is that they try to, they saw the Ukraine tragedy, and they are convinced right now that if they are taking a side in the
Right.
great power competition, which means if they are taking the U.S. side or they somehow align too close to the United States, they will be invaded. They will be punished by China.
Yeah.
They don't want to see that. So they think that they are in this very similar situation as Ukraine, but Ukraine took the wrong option, and their option may be better than which is try to be neutral. Try to accommodate China to the extent that is still possible, but at the same time reaching out to many other people, not just the United States, but also Japan, India, and even Russia. And they really, try to maintain their good relationship with Russia, even though Russia is, isolated. And for Vietnam, it's a small country. They need to care a lot about international law. They have said several times, their diplomats said, for a small country, international law is your best weapon. So, and
they hosted Putin, who had an ICC warrant
yeah,
for arresting him. So
and so that's the contradiction that the
Yeah.
Vietnamese have to somehow,
reconcile or come to terms with.
yeah, so their foreign policy is full of contradictions. If you want to, rationalize
Yeah.
their foreign policy and try to, to put their foreign policy in terms that is black and white, you're gonna, it's a misleading way, because Vietnamese foreign policy is not black and white. It's
Shades of gray.
Shade of grays.
Yeah.
It's full of contradictions.
But to what degree is that also influenced by non-geopolitical factors? Let's say, let's be honest. The domestic politics
Yeah,
in Vietnam
yeah,
has been
yeah.
quite interesting, if I can put it.
Right.
How many presidents were?
Right.
And many people are saying that, I don't know if you can call them the Silovikis, but you have the rise of the securocrats in Vietnam, which is also a reflection of the weakening of the more quasi-liberal, cosmopolitan leadership that we were talking about 10, 15 years ago. And also this, some would say, legitimate concern about color revolutions. Not in this kind of a Kremlin propaganda, but in the
Yeah.
sense that I've been going to Vietnam almost every year, once or twice, and tremendous explosion in middle class, tremendous explosion in consumerism. You know, Hanoi is increasingly looking like Seoul to me. I mean, if you keep on going in this direction. So I won't be surprised some of the more ideological trained officials in Vietnam will say, like, wait, you give this 5 to 10 years, they won't want more voice, more liberalism, more even democracy even. And that could be a regime existential question for the regime. And my sense is China is playing on that, right? I look at all of the major statements between Vietnamese officials and Chinese officials, color revolutions come up, right? And party-to-party ties, communism. Can you tell me about that? Because when you were writing about normalization of between Vietnam and US 10, 15 years ago, 2013, 14, 15, it didn't look like that way, right? It looked like the priority there was doi moi and economic liberalization and momentum. But we're in a different world. Is Vietnam worried about the price of its success, economic success also, from a national security standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, don't let yourself, misled by the rhetoric.
Yep.
Even though they talk about bamboo diplomacy or color revolution, whatever else, they're rhetorics. You have to look at the reality, which is very complex and full of contradictions. And so
very Hegelian.
Yeah, again, for Vietnam, of course, and now we have a new leader in Vietnam who is less ideological than his predecessor. His predecessor was still ideological, even though he was also pragmatic.
Yeah.
And you can see his pragmatism in foreign policy, right? But he's still a little, ideological, and he has limits in what he can do, what he thinks that morally he can do. The new leader of Vietnam is very pragmatic, and I don't think that he would create limits for himself in domestic or foreign policy, and so he would conduct a foreign policy which is very pragmatic, nothing to do with ideology.
So you mean the party-to-party ties issues
now? They are using the party-to-party ties, whatever,
for real political reasons.
For China, they okay because you have party-to-party ties with China. You're gonna try to use that for your own interest. With Trump, for example, they also invite the Trump organization to invest in the home province of the new Vietnamese party chief. A big project, $1 billion or something. So they know how to, they are using any good channel,
any
ties,
any language,
whether it's party-to-party ties or it's personal ties, and they are pragmatic. They are very pragmatic.
Although, Alex, I would say, ironically, that sounds very dialectically oriented. So let's just so that we get the right synthesis, right? But kidding aside, of course, the other factor here is this immense explosion also of Chinese investments in Vietnam. I mean, it comes with geography. You're just next to the Prairie River Delta. China is becoming expensive, more and more automation, labor costs are going high. So more and more Chinese companies, high quality Chinese companies going down, EV car production going down to Vietnam. To what degree can that also influence Vietnam's foreign policy orientation? Because you said they have a very pragmatic leadership.
We don't know, and they don't know either.
They don't know either.
They just see the opportunity of the trade war with the United States and China, and that is the opportunity for them to kind of benefit from the decoupling, and so they just welcome Chinese investment. But of course, they say that your investment has to be a little high end rather than just dumping your bad goods. But they are pragmatic, and so they are a little not very farsighted. Any pragmatic people will be a little not very farsighted.
Yeah, because you're looking at the benefits as of now.
Yeah. Because you're tempted to get the benefits right away, and so yes, that's one thing. Another thing is that,
so you're saying because it's less ideological, there's also a less coherent vision of the future. Yes. Which is one thing we tend to associate with Vietnam, right? That you have this very forward-looking strategic culture. Again, everything's relative, right? Compared to the rest of us in ASEAN, it's usually Vietnam which is being praised. Whether it's Lee Kuan Yew or Kissinger or anyone, they keep on saying Vietnam is always that. Vietnam has even been called the Prussia of Asia, right? It's kind of a tiny but like very core. But what you're saying right now is with all of this prosperity and investment coming in, it kind of muddies the water in terms of your ability to plan long term. Now, the thing is, the expectations with Trump, there could be also some response to not only in terms of de-risking from China, but for instance, we're hearing a lot about China investing in Mexico to get around, right, that de-risking and the coupling. What do you think is the correct way for Vietnam to look at it? Because the accusation against Vietnam is that it's not necessarily friendshoring, it's more like a way for China to circumvent its export restrictions. If you were to advise Vietnam, or if you were to hazard a speculation on how Vietnam is going to navigate this more assertive American approach to industrial policy and making sure friendshoring is done properly, what should Vietnam do, and how do you think Vietnam will do it
Well,
under this pragmatic leadership?
if I were the Vietnamese leaders, I would just doing almost similar to what they are doing right now,
Yeah.
because the future is very uncertain.
Yeah, stick just
You
to
don't
what
know.
you know. Yeah,
You don't know who will win.
yes.
You don't know what will happen.
Yeah.
Anything can happen. Just to throw out a scenario, for example.
Yeah.
The new Trump administration, sort of try, threaten Japan and Korea that you have to pay for our troops because we are defending you guys, and so you have to pay for that, right? And Japan and Korea, you will interpret that okay, so now we have to be independent, and for South Korea to be independent, they have to have an independent nuclear capability, right? 70% of the respondents in South Korea prefer a independent nuclear capability, right? So if South Korea start to go nuclear, Japan will also go nuclear.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then Taiwan will think, oh wow, maybe we need to do something.
Yeah.
And then China see that and will have to prevent the worst.
Yeah.
What happened, right? So nobody knows.
It's a mess,
So now for us, with a U.S. which is not going to go the similar way that it has been going for 7 decades or so, it will be a very new crisis that we have no idea about it.
Yeah.
And then the whole future is uncertain. So what are you doing? Well, we have to look at everything.
Yeah.
And there's a Vietnamese proverb which says
I love
that,
give it to me. Yeah. I love these things. These are good.
When you have illness, you have to pray and to any gods.
To get healed.
To pray to any gods.
Yeah.
So you have to pray first. Of course, you have you're sick. You have to pray, but you have to pray to any gods. Any god.
That's the pragmatic.
And so the Vietnamese are trying to reach out in China, Japan,
India,
US, India, Russia, everybody. So,
so in short, what you're saying is the trauma of the Indo-China wars, the unreliability of the mutual defense treaty with Soviet Union, was just so profound that made Vietnam realize you have to duke it out on your own. And in this era of tremendous uncertainty, and also a more pragmatic leadership in Vietnam, your best option is just to stick to your guns and wait this out and hunker down and hope for the best while preparing for the worst. Yeah. I love that because there's a lot of
that's the same as Biden, Trump make the same talk the same sound that we need to be strong, and so we have to invest on ourselves. We have to invest and make us strong again. So Vietnamese, the new leader, also talking about the new era of a rising Vietnamese nation or something, a rise of Vietnamese nation. So he vows to get more investment and to make Vietnam more economically stronger and so on and so forth. However, the question is, can you do that?
Yeah.
You want to do that, but can you do it?
Yes.
Right? A lot of the politicians want to achieve very big, lofty goals, but most of the politicians fail.
Again, I like this conversation because the journalistic and even the think tank discourse is, they portray Vietnam, which is like the prince of fortune and making the most. But I know that deep inside there's this profound uncertainty and even anxiety. Yeah. And I talked to a lot of our Vietnamese friends. They say, well, at the end of the day, yes, we can talk a lot about independent foreign. You have still a U.S. behind you to a
Yes.
certain degree.
Yes.
We are still on our own. So
Yeah.
don't be too much
Yeah.
overwhelmed with these positive headlines. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, Alex, because I think you have a very brutally realistic understanding of Vietnam in a longitudinal sense, and also the open-ended situation we're facing right now. The other thing that makes, of course, Vietnam also not necessarily the greatest envy of everyone else is the South China Sea disputes. And it's not going away because, maybe for the past 2 years, things were not as loud,
Yeah.
or maybe Vietnam was not exposing things as
Right.
much. But now, once again, we're seeing the South China Sea issues, incidents in the peninsula coming to the fore. What is your understanding of this whole struggling and cooperation game in the South China Sea? How sustainable it is? Will there be a moment of truth sooner than later, if we can hazard the
Yeah.
speculation here?
Yeah, I mean, the South China Sea has become a very big concern for Vietnam, and has become the biggest obstacle between China and Vietnam. The thing is that you have, for the government in Vietnam, they have a two-level games.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're playing the game with China, but at the same time, they're playing the game with their own domestic population. And the domestic population is any population is like that. They are not rational.
Their sentiments,
Their
emotions,
sentiment,
nationalism.
they're short-sighted and they are irrational, whatever else. But they are the population. They have the mass of, put the pressure on the government.
Even if it's not a democracy.
Even in
if it's-
Vietnam,
yeah,
in a communist country, even in a communist regime, the government wants to control, and they have already controlled a large part of the society. But still, to some, and when it comes to something like national sovereign, national pride or national sovereignty or territorial integrity and things like that are very much in line what they preach, and the population will use that they preach to put the pressure back to them, and so their the government's challenge is how to control, how to fine tune the population's emotion and sentiment and so on and so forth. So I think that on the one hand, of course, the government wants calm and a peaceful environment with China, and so they would, even if they want to make, they have already been making a lot of conciliation, and accommodations to China, but just to some extent, because they have the domestic the population, and the domestic population is irrational. Even if the government can believe that if you pass some sort of red line, you're going to get a war with China, and we don't want to be like Ukraine. You see that nobody will come to rescue you, and and if you're alone, fighting China alone, and China is bigger than Russia. And Vietnam is not so, it's just like similar to Ukraine.
Yeah,
So how
mid-sized
can
country. Yeah.
you can't, and so, and war, Vietnam, the Vietnamese not the, well, generations of Vietnamese have been enduring war.
Yeah.
And most people don't want war.
Exactly.
Of course, right?
Also traumatized by that.
Yeah. However, you also have your sentiments, and sometimes you just don't care.
Are you referring to the massive anti-China protests in 2014 when they burned down even sometimes mistakenly Taiwanese? And all?
Yeah.
Are you talking about that when you talk about sentiments and irrationality? Because
Well,
I just
this
want
is
to make it.
that
Or is that
riot,
an expression of
that
that?
riots in Vietnam in 2014
Yeah.
is a little bit more complex, because most of the people who burned and attacked and looted the Taiwanese factories in the south of Vietnam were criminals, not ordinary
Gangs,
people.
yeah.
They are gangs, they are criminals. And so now I see very similar parallels between those events
Interesting.
with what happened in Europe, in Germany and Lithuania and Poland, and you see the footprints of Putin. So I think that the
Interesting.
hands of the Chinese Ministry of Security was also there in the riots. However, it goes very aligned with the general sentiment.
Of course. It plays on
So it
that.
plays on
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you, So maybe the number of people who are killed, the number of factories which are looted and attacked, and so on and so forth are the result of the criminal kind of China hybrid war or something. But
Yeah.
the general anti-China sentiment in Vietnam is very genuine.
Just like the
And so
Philippines.
and so the government has to, and even within the government there are also people who does,
Yeah.
who are with the population rather than with.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so to some point you just you and me, we want to be calm, right? We want to calculate our interest, and for the
National interest, yeah.
for the rational interest, we don't want war. And so maybe we can think that even if even I am a rational realist, sometimes I think that in order to to live in peace with China, we need to give up a little. Like Ukraine, they have to give up a little, not a little, several provinces to China in order to just
Crimea, yeah.
And so for Vietnam, maybe the same, but because of the sheer balance of power between the two countries.
You mean the South China
And
Sea?
so they may need to accommodate China to some extent, but to what extent? And so China wants more, and and just to a limit you can accommodate China. After that limit, you become a different person. You just, I don't care anymore. Because it's about your something more than just your material interest. And for people, it's something, you can talk about honor and pride and agency and whatever else, but that is very, very important for people. Sometimes people can sacrifice their own lives.
Yep.
And so there will be people who, not just in Vietnam, Philippines, China, everywhere, they are willing to sacrifice their lives. And so you cannot maintain peace anymore.
Yeah. On the last part of our conversation, wow, that was quite a breeze. We covered a lot. I mean, we did the whole reverse Nixon. I think that was a very important thought experiment, if I can put it that way. I want to adjust aperture a little bit. You're in Manila, so I think this is a safe zone. Realistically, what do you think is ASEAN's place in the American strategic calculus if Trump comes in? Is it something along the lines of too many of them are unreliable, probably are swinging to the other side? All of this hedging conversation is just really performative. You have the Philippines, which is a U.S. treaty ally and looks like on our side, and they have reasons to be there. Thailand, we'll just keep it there. And then Vietnam is probably something we can work on. Is that a more Trump 2.0 potentially approach to this? Again, of course, everything will be said on the speaking of rhetoric. But I'm talking about like brutal, realistic understanding of this part of the world, because everyone talks about ASEAN and hedging and balancing. But my understanding is that in some quarters, policy-making quarters, they're brutally honest. No, most of this country we cannot rely on, and these are the countries we can focus on. And Philippines obviously is probably the only, if not among 2 or 3 countries in this region, that the U.S. can find as a trusted partner on the China and new Cold War question.
Yeah, we don't need Trump to tell us that ASEAN is useless in dealing with China.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I'm kidding, Alex.
I don't.
We have been saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't say the truth because I don't claim to know the truth, right?
Yeah.
But my observation of ASEAN from the time ASEAN was born, 1967, ASEAN was not designed to deal with great powers.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when you have a crisis that involves a great power, ASEAN is useless.
Because it's not its function.
It's not its function.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. ASEAN, is designed to be a forum, an arena rather than an actor. ASEAN is not an actor. It's an arena. It provides, for ARF and EAS and ADMM Plus and whatever else, to provide a forum for you guys to come in, and so we talk. And so I can claim to be the centrality. ASEAN centrality is in that way that ASEAN is they are no longer talking about the driver's seat, right? Because they are not driving.
We're backseat.
Yeah, they're backseat. They just try to provide the podium, the arena for everybody to come in and take photo and things like that and talk with each other. So they're like a hotel. Like hotel provide the facility for you guys to talk, but so ASEAN is not designed to deal with great
But what about
powers.
working together? Philippines and Vietnam, I mean, not to exaggerate it, but
Now
we're kind of doing stuff
within ASEAN,
unilaterally.
unilateral, you can bilateral actually
Yeah.
in this sense. It's bilateral between Vietnam and the Philippines because the two countries have very convergence of strategic interest in in South China Sea, and also not just in South China, but now more than just that, because both Vietnam and the Philippines are committed to resisting China's bid for regional hegemony.
Yeah.
So not just in South China Sea, territorial issue, but also a bigger question about regional, the shape of the region, the strategic autonomy of each country, and international order and regional order.
Can you foresee a Philippines-Vietnam working, and then more or less it's a plus situation with Japan a bit here, with India a bit here, with the US a bit here?
They are already doing that.
They're already doing that, but more of that. More concrete.
Yes. I think now you don't have a name for that.
No name.
But they are doing exactly the same
As we
thing.
speak
They are reaching out, and the Quad countries are now they're very close partners
to all of us,
particularly with regard to their national interest in the South China Sea, and they are the bigger concern about resisting China's domination in the region at large. And also their national interests are also aligned very closely with those of the Quad countries.
Right.
And so they are de facto Quad plus people country, even though they may try to deny because we are in a gray zone.
Yeah.
And whatever we do, we deny. No, not me. I'm not doing.
Ostrich.
But, and so I think they are already de facto Quad plus nations, and I think there is even more opportunity for them to strengthen that, to continue to pursue that path in the future.
On that note, thank you so much, Alex, for this fantastic conversation. I hope people appreciate this, because I always love to talk about this big picture issue, but also the Vietnam aspect. And what you provided is really spot on. And I hope people will appreciate that, in terms of knowing that there are many layers to foreign policy, including to very exciting and dynamic countries like the Vietnam. And maybe in the future, Alex, hopefully we can talk about lessons for each other, for Philippines and others. But that could be another conversation. Catch us again here next week on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on Spotify and YouTube. I'm Richard Hidarian, and that was a view from Manila. We're One News, all sides, all the time.